So this video is all about turning this into this. We're going to cover the weathering process of the SU-30 landing gear. This process can be used on any landing gear or just general weathering practices. So let's dive in to weathering this gear. So the gear on this aircraft is aluminum. We're not painting it. We were thinking about painting it gray, but the reason we're not going to is because the aluminum color matches the scale color very closely. So if this was a painted leg, one of the things we could do is we could use a brush and basically wipe off our weathering materials. But because we don't have that opportunity, we're going to airbrush these legs. So weathering in general is a fairly subjective topic. People have varying opinions on what is correct, what's not correct. So we're just going to do what I feel is a good amount of weathering to match the rest of this aircraft. So this plane came weathered from SKYMASTER. It's what I would consider kind of average, normal, run-of-the-mill weathering. It's fairly heavy in some areas, but it's very well done in my opinion, and I think it looks good. So essentially our goal is to match the weathering from the plane to the landing gear. Now the main landing gear are fairly straightforward. There's not a lot of crazy detail on them, so they should be fairly quick and easy. But our front landing gear has a lot more detail to it, so it's going to be a little bit more time consuming, but it still should be a fairly straightforward job. Now, the reason we're going to use airbrush is because if you were to just paint on your whatever you're using for weathering, one of the disadvantages, the aluminum finish, kind of doesn't really look realistic in my opinion. So that's why we're going to be using an airbrush. So tools for this, basically we're using oil paints. It doesn't really matter a brand or anything like that, but what I generally use is raw umber and lamp black, or often referred to as burnt umber as a normal color, and lamp black. So these are the mixtures that I typically use. In this case, I'll be mixing it up in a little bottle, and we're going to be mixing it up with a solvent to make it a sprayable liquid. Now we're going to be using our airbrush. Now the airbrush really doesn't need to be anything fancy. The airbrush I'm going to use for this is just a cheap $60 airbrush from Princess Auto. If you guys are in the US, it could be McMaster Car, but just a generic airbrush, nothing fancy. All right, so first step here, I just took a couple slivers of both of our colors, put them in our jar and smacked them, and now they're on the bottom of the jar. So I'm going to use some lacquer thinner for this. Turpentine's good. I usually use turpentine if I'm doing like a wash, but we'll use lacquer thinner because we're spraying it and it's going to be nice and thin and evaporate quickly. Okay, so we've got our mixture here. I've been shaking this for about 10 minutes. Initially took trusty bent screwdriver, kind of mixed it around just to make sure that we had smaller pieces in there of our oil paints. And I think now we've got a good solution that is ready to spray. So we've got our airbrush all set up here. We've done some checks and balances on it, and everything looks good with the airbrush. And I think the spot we're going to start off with is just the wheels, just to get a feel for everything. And the wheels are pretty straightforward. You're basically going to start from the center, work your way out. I mean, you're essentially just adding shadows is really what you're doing. You're thinking about how this thing would weather and wear and, you know, look old and used, right? So you're going to have some grease and dirt coming out from the hub here. You're going to have some shadows in this deep area, probably a bit of shadow in this perimeter. So what I'll probably start off doing is spraying the shadows in the circles, and then we'll do some nice grease marks coming out from the center. All right, guys, so always going to double check your airbrush is working on something. So I'm just going to add some very light Here we go. So it's a pretty straightforward process. Something like the wheel here, you're basically just making it dirty, right? And focusing a lot of that dirt on the center, but that is basically the effect that we're looking for. So I'm going to repeat that same process on our other wheels, and after the wheels, we will move to the landing gear itself. Okay, so we are ready to go with our leg weathering now. So we've got the same mixture all mixed in. Basically, we're just going to make this look dirty. So I'm just going to paint the leading edge first. Just because that's going to be in the most airflow on the actual aircraft. And there we go. So a little hard to see, but we've got a nice grease mark all over the front. I'll show you there. So it's a nice dark mark on the front, and then we'll just continue that mark around the other side. When you're doing weathering like this, you generally want to make sure you're moving in the same direction as the airflow. Now we'll just come around our knuckles. Down here is going to be the most dirty. So that's pretty much what we're looking for. I'm going to do a little bit of work on the inside, but essentially just making it look like it is used. I like the brown mix, the burnt umber and black. It's a really nice combination for weathering. All right, so there's a close-up shot of our kind of final product. So really all you're doing when you're doing this is you're looking to, I mean, you can do it however you want, but what I'm looking to do is darken the areas that naturally will be kind of either have grease coming out of them or areas that will be out of the airflow. So an area like this, as an example, behind that little, this piece right here, you're gonna get areas that maybe will have less cleaning done on them. You know, an area like behind all this stuff here, you're gonna get dark shadows in between the hydraulic steering systems and everything. So that is now complete. So it really suits the aircraft more now. It's weathered. We did the wheels, the diverter on the front here as well too is complete. All right, so that is gear weathering on the SU or anything 101. Ultimately with weathering, you just have to be creative with it. That's really what it comes down to. In a situation like this, if we weren't happy with what we did right now, we could take some mineral spirits, some rubbing alcohol, and just wipe off what we've installed in here. This oil paint is going to take about a weekish to set up, and it's fairly delicate until that time passes. So be creative with weathering. If you don't like what you did, you just remove it, wipe it off, get rid of it, keep wiping it until you're happy with it. So it's a fun, creative side of the hobby. I enjoy making this stuff look old. It's kind of unique and it really fits this aircraft. So if you guys have any questions, list them down below. You can also reach out to me, lightersideofrc@gmail.com. An even cooler way is if you watch our live streams from the shop on our other channel, which is the Lighter Side of RC After Dark. We do live streams from the shop here about every 2 weeks. And during those live streams, it gives you a real behind the scenes, in-depth look at what we do here at the shop. But it also allows you to interact with us, ask us questions during that live stream, which we'll answer. And it's just a great time. So definitely encourage you to check it out. Thanks guys for watching the tutorial on Weathering 101, and we'll see you in the next video.